Hello, my name is Rachel Felling, and I'm a naturalist with the Zionsville Parks and Recreation Department. We're going to spend some time today talking about setting up a bird feeding station in your yard for bird feeding for beginners. So, the goal is to help give you the information that you will need to set up a spot that you can attract a different variety of birds, understand what types of feeders and seeds you should use, what kind of maintenance you should expect, where to put your feeders, and then any kind of troubleshooting that you may encounter along the way. Bird feeding is such a great hobby, and getting you set up now will ensure that you have the entire winter to watch the birds. So bird feeding is this hobby that has grown immensely over the past few decades, and a lot of people have bird feeders in their yards, and there's a lot of different reasons that you might consider it. You're providing habitat for lots of different species when you feed the birds, not just the birds, but other things around it too. And we know that bird populations have also been in decline significantly over the last several decades for multiple reasons, a big one being habitat loss. So if you can treat your yard as a potential habitat for birds, not only will you help birds, but you will help other species of animals that also rely on the things that you're going to set up. Additionally, having a bird feeding station in your yard has been shown to really increase mental health and happiness for many people. So whether you are a bird enthusiast or just trying to add a little bit of fun and color to your yard, setting up a few bird feeders is a great way to do it. So, with all of that said, let's talk about what setting up a habitat for birds would look like. Okay, so within a habitat, we need a few different things. All animals need a few things in their habitats, and that's food, they need water, they need shelter, and they need space to move around. That's no different for birds. So, when we talk about setting up bird feeders, we often are only focusing on the food part. But if you really want to create a whole habitat for these species, considering those other elements as well will help increase the different things that you can bring to your yard. Can you just put up one feeder and be done? Sure. But if you want to keep lots of different kinds of birds coming and coming back over and over, bringing in those other elements work well. So, like you see in some of these pictures, we have some nest boxes. Birds don't live in these nest boxes. They're not like a house for them, but it is a place for them to raise their babies. So this time of year, as we head into winter, not as important, but come spring and summer, nesting sites are really awesome to have around your yard. You'll also see a photo of a bird bath. So, like all animals, birds really need water. Adding a water feature to your yard, especially if it's somewhere not too far from your feeders, can be a really great way to add some variety to the birds that come. All birds need water, so sometimes they use it for actual bathing, but they also drink out of it as well. But just keep in mind it's one more thing to keep clean. The other photos you see are some native plants that can also provide food, which we'll talk about more in just a little bit, and shelter. So in the photo in the bottom middle, you see some birds kind of stuck and hiding in a bush, not stuck. They're just kind of tucked in there. Finding that shelter where they can get away from the elements, the cold, the wind, the rain, is great, but it also gives them a spot to hide from predators as well. So leaving some brush in your yard, planting some bushes that might give them places to hide. These are all really great ways to help create habitat elements. I personally, every year after Christmas, we take our Christmas tree, after we've taken everything off of it, obviously, and put it outside a couple feet behind our bird feeders, and just lay it out there. And it creates a great spot for birds to hide in. And we leave it there all winter long and it decomposes naturally. So that's just one fun tip of a way to create some shelter. All right, so the first thing that anybody usually asks me when we start talking about what kind of bird feeders and what to put out is what type of feeder, what type of seed. There are so many options out there. And we'll talk about some of the different ones that you can get, benefits of different types of feeders, different types of seed. The rule, though, generally is the more variety you offer, the more variety of birds you'll get. So that's a good way to think about it. If you, again, can you put out just one feeder and be done? Sure. But if you want to put out a few different things, you're likely to bring in a few different types of birds. I love the image on the right. This comes from the Cornell Ornithology website, but it shows all the different birds sitting on a feeder with their preferred type of feed or seed right next to them. And you can see there are some overlaps, but a lot of them like a lot of different things. So that's what we'll get into next. what types of feeders should you be looking for, what birds will be attracted to those kind, and what seed is appropriate for each of those feeders. Okay, so let's talk about bird seed first. Which types of seed should you look for? What's worth your money? What's not? If you go to any type of big box store, hardware store, you're likely to see birdseed. Occasionally we find it in pet stores as well, farm stores, and there's a lot of variety, and there's also a lot of variety in the price. So if you want to get your most bang for your buck, there's a few different options. We have an image here with lots of different types of seed that are often included, either sold individually or in mixed bags. So that's your option to start with. Do you want just one type of seed, or do you want to get a mix? A mix is usually a little bit more economically friendly. Those bags are a little bit cheaper, but you also want to take a look at the distribution and what's in it. So here in Indiana, a lot of the things that the birds like to eat would include the things like sunflower seeds, safflower seeds. There are two very popular ones. And then if you start to include a lot of like millet, milo, or oats, those varieties are eaten by less birds and less of the variety that most people want in their yards. So if you're looking to attract lots of our native birds, I love to see a mix that includes a lot of sunflower, and there's a few different types of sunflower, but they like all of it, and a lot of safflower, and very, very little millet, milo, or oats. Peanuts can be mixed in, cracked corn can be mixed in, and that's fine. But the cheapest variety of mixes will often include lots and lots of millet with just a little bit of sunflower and safflower sprinkled in. And for your value of the birds that you're going to attract, I personally find it a little bit better to go higher end to get better birds. That's a personal choice. If you're on a budget, you can get a mix and see what you get, but you may end up with a lot of the birds that a lot of people tend to not want in their yards and as big of varieties like house sparrows or European starlings, neither of which are native to North America, but they're here and they will come and they will eat it, but you won't see as many cardinals, blue jays, tufted titmice, chickadees, nuthatches. They're less likely to be there when you go heavy on the millet. So that's just one thing to think of. When you get your seed, whatever type you get, you're going to want to store it somewhere that it's in an airtight container. You want your seed to stay dry, and just like anything else, it can get stale, go bad. Just like if you leave a container of crackers open in your pantry, they will go bad. So same thing for birdseed. You want to keep it nice and airtight, nice and dry. It can get moldy if it gets wet. That's not a good thing. If it gets like that, throw it away. And then there's a couple other kind of seeds you may see even in just regular box stores, one of which is Niger. Some people call it thistle, but it's not the same as the thistle that grows around here sometimes. And then suet. So we'll take a look at a couple of those in more detail in the types of feeders that you need, but Niger is teeny tiny little seeds. Sometimes you can buy varieties that also include like cracked sunflower with it. And those tend to be food for some of our smaller birds like goldfinches, and they require a special feeder because it's such a tiny seed that it needs teeny tiny openings. Suet is something that a lot of birds like, but we often think of it specifically for woodpeckers. It's a blend of usually seed with then some sort of fat base. It could be a vegetable oil base, it could be an actual lard base, and it is formed into like a cake or a square, and then it goes into a feeder where the bird lands on it and picks it out. So those are things to think of too. Now, where can you buy these? There are lots of stores out there. We have a great partnership with our local Wild Birds Unlimited store. That's all they do is sell birdseed and birdseed products. So they're a great local resource if you have one near you. They can answer a lot of questions, and you're going to get the highest quality seed and feeders there. We can talk more about the feeders in a bit. That's not to say, though, that you shouldn't look for more budget-friendly options, whether it is at a hardware store, grocery store. Just watch the seed varieties and make sure that we're not going too heavy on those less desirable seeds, the cheaper seeds. I've seen really good seed mixes at Costco. If you have a Costco nearby, the birdseed mix that they have there, I think, is actually fantastic. If you have a Meijer near you, our Meijer locally here near Zionsville carries a ton of great bird seed and a ton of great bird feeders as well. So those are just a couple to check out. Again, you know, obviously not trying to promote any one thing over another, just trying to share good information of where to look and check things out. Okay, let's talk about a few different styles of feeders that you can consider. So for your standard sunflower, safflower, or general mixed seeds, there's a few different types that you might want to get. We have what we call the platform or tray feeder, which is what you see on the left side that is under the little thing that looks like a house. The platform would literally be an open platform. Birds fly into it, they pick their seeds off it. A lot of different birds like to eat off platforms. You will see things like cardinals on these, occasionally chickadees, those kinds of birds. And obviously any kind of seed can be sprinkled there, so that works really well. The only downside to a platform feeder is that the seeds can be knocked off. So there are a couple downsides. The seeds can be easily knocked off and get dirty easily. You also ideally would want some sort of cover over it because as an open platform, if it gets wet, it's going to go bad faster. So that's something to consider with a platform. Now you can buy an additional little sort of like a plastic umbrella that goes over your feeder that your feeder would then hang off of. That's an option. Another type of feeder that you might see is the one that looks like the little house. So we call it a hopper feeder or a house feeder. Now, these are awesome. The seed goes in the top, the little roof lifts up, you pour the seed in, and then the birds go to the little trough on either side. Again, lots of birds like this style of feeder. It works well. Sometimes the seeds do fall out, especially if you have a mix in there. Sometimes the birds will sit there and pick out what they want and throw the stuff on the ground. So having the combo with a platform or a tray underneath it, like you see in the photo on the left, is a good way to save the seeds from just hitting the ground. Okay. In the center here, we have what we call a tube feeder. Tube feeders are shaped just as they are described in a long tube, and then there's openings for the birds to get in. Now, the photo you see in the center has a squirrel cage around it to keep squirrels off. Once you start feeding birds, squirrels may become your nemesis, unless you're also just trying to feed them as well. But and I personally don't have too much of a problem with them eating some feed, but they will often eat more than their fair share. So having a cage like that can definitely help deter some of the squirrels. And then some of the other birds can still get in it as well. They also make squirrel-proof feeders, which is what you see the squirrel spinning on the right side. They are designed specifically when the squirrel jumps on, they can't hang on. They just spin. Kind of comical. Squirrels are very crafty. They're very smart. So sometimes we're pulling out all of the stops to keep them from stealing the seed. So far, we've been talking about the types of feeders that you would put a general seed mix in, or your, again, sunflower, safflower seeds. Those could go into the feeders that we talked about in the previous slide, the tube feeders, the house hopper feeders, or the platform feeders. There are some other specialized feeders that you may want to consider adding to your bird feeding station, okay? So we'll start at the very top here. Right now, we're headed towards winter, so a hummingbird feeder is not what we're considering at the moment, but perhaps you'll watch this video in the spring or summer. A hummingbird feeder is a great addition from around late April to early May through October to feed our hummingbirds. They migrate south the rest of the year, so they're not here. But hummingbird food is nectar that is made from a 4-to-1 sugar water mix, and they fly up, they drink it, and they are one of the most fun birds to watch. I love having a hummingbird feeder out. Again, to keep with the slightly off-season birds to start, below that you see that black and orange bird. That is an oriole. Baltimore orioles are one of the most fun birds to watch as well. They bring such a flash of color when they show up. They will drink nectar just like the hummingbirds, but they have a slightly larger beak, so they generally can't drink out of your standard hummingbird feeder. They require a different feeder. And there are a few different kinds. The one you see in that photo that the oriole is on has a spot for the hummingbird nectar in it, in that dish, just like the one above, but with bigger openings for them to drink the nectar out of. Additionally, it has little bowls to fill with their very favorite food, which is grape jelly. They love those. They also love orange slices. So when I put my feeder out and I have that exact one that is in that photo, I put a little slice of orange and grape jelly in the little dish, and they love to come to it. So those are two that you can consider in the spring and summer months. The other specialized feeders will start on the left-hand side and work our way over. You can see the yellow and black birds in the far left picture. Those are goldfinches, and they are on the Niger or thistle feeder that we talked about earlier. So that's the seed that's teeny, teeny, tiny. Again, sometimes it comes in a mix that includes crushed sunflower. They like that as well. So that's the mix that I personally buy for mine. But they need that to have those tiny little openings. You're not going to get a lot of other birds that are going to be able to eat from that, but that's okay. Goldfinches are really cute, really fun. Niger and thistle seed, though, does not last as long as some other seeds. It can get, if it gets a little wet, it gets caked up and can get moldy faster. So keep an eye on it if you put one of those out. Sometimes I fill mine only half so that I'm not wasting as much, and just you fill it a little bit more frequently. Now, the one in the second left photo, you see a downy woodpecker on what we call a cylinder feeder. Cylinder feeders require not just a specialized feeder, but a specialized kind of seed. The seed comes packed in these cylinders, and they use some sort of gelatin-like substance to hold it all together. Cylinder feeders have a few benefits. One benefit is because it's all stuck together, the bird can't just fly there, grab a seed, fly away. They have to kind of hang out for a few minutes to get the seeds that they're trying to get to before they leave, so you can get a better look at them. Two, they are less messy, okay? So you just plop the cylinder on and they take the seed away. There's not going to be all the shells around the ground. You can even buy cylinders that are all just already shelled seed, so it really, really minimizes the seed on the ground. This is really beneficial for somebody who may live in like an apartment, somebody who may have a harder time getting out and maintaining and cleaning. If you have somebody who can't lift big birdseed bags as easily, cylinders are a great option for them as well. So I really like a cylinder feeder. The downside is that the cylinders tend to be a little on the pricey side. So for not everybody, it's a good accessible option financially, but it does end up being more accessible in terms of maintenance and care. And then finally, on the lower right-hand corner, we have a suet feeder. So remember I said suet is that block where you have some sort of seed or feed. Some of them are made out with peanut butter, and then it is congealed or solidified using some sort of fat, which the birds need. That's good for them. Especially come wintertime. And woodpeckers really, really like it. Other birds will come to it too. You will see chickadees on a suet block. You'll see a nuthatch on a suet block. But if you want to attract woodpeckers, get a suet feeder, get it in there. And when you see a suet feeder, sometimes they're just a little square to drop the block in. The one that's in this photo has the lower thing on it, and that helps woodpeckers specifically hang on, because when they land on a feeder, just like if they were landing on a tree, they use their tail like a little kickstand to help give them balance, and that is what that section of the feeder is for. So really great addition. All right, and as you consider building your habitat for birds, you can spend tons of money on really cool feeders, on really cool seeds, but one of the best things you can do to create habitat is to put in the very best feeder out there, which is native plants. These are the things that the birds actually want to eat, that they are evolved to eat, that have been, growing alongside them for longer than we've been putting out feeders. So you can plant certain plants in your yard that will keep birds coming back over and over. They're evolved for our climate. So native plants are something that come back every year. You plant them once, as long as they don't die, they will just keep coming back. And that's really awesome. They provide birds direct food, and then sometimes they provide birds indirect food. So native plants also attract different types of insects that are native to our area, some of which will attract other birds. It's really awesome to have those insects here when birds are nesting as well, because even our seed-eating birds will feed insects to their babies for protein during nesting season. So consider adding some native plants to your yard. This could be an entirely separate presentation on what types of native plants to add. There are some really great resources out there to find good native plants, whether it is through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology or other birding websites, but there are plenty of plants out there specifically to help bring birds to your yard. So consider that in the future as well. And again, like we discussed a little bit earlier, when you're trying to attract birds to your yard, creating an entire habitat for them is the best way to do it. So not just putting out the seeds, not just putting out feeders, but also including clean water, okay? And we'll talk about cleaning feeders, but keep the water clean as well. If you notice that the birds have pooped in it, it needs to get cleaned. Add shelter and hiding spots for them, give them some nesting locations. But if you are going to put up nest boxes, you don't want to put those right next to the feeders because birds are obviously a little bit territorial of where they're nesting. So if you have feeding spots on one side of your yard, put nesting boxes again over on a different side just to give them a little space so that they are a little less stressed during nesting season. Okay, let's spend a minute talking about another really important aspect of setting up bird feeders in your yard. Where you put your feeders is really, really, really important for the safety of the birds. So one of the main reasons that birds die is they hit windows. So we want to prevent window strikes as much as we possibly can. So if you're setting up your feeder, you want your feeders within 3 feet of a window or at least 10 feet away from a window. And the reason is this: if it's 3 feet or less from the window, that's a small enough space that if the bird gets startled, like let's say a hawk comes by or some sort of predator, or they get into a territorial dispute, and it takes off, even if it goes at the window, it's close enough that it's not going to be going with enough velocity to really hurt itself, okay? Or if it's at least 10 feet away, then it has enough room to hopefully then see its reflection move around. If it's within the less than that, they often don't see the window as something to run into. They see it as just a continuation of the same outdoor space. So within 3 feet or more than 10 feet away. All right. The other thing to consider is keeping other animals off of it. Squirrels are the #1 bird feeder bandits. And they have an 8-foot horizontal jump. Okay, so needing to keep it about 8 feet away from other trees or cover to keep squirrels from jumping on it is a really great thing to consider. So that might mean getting a little creative with where you're putting it, or understanding that the smartest, bravest squirrels, especially in winter when they're also looking for food, are going to be on your feeder as well. And they'll just sit there and eat it all. You can see in this photo, we have something called a baffle. So this is an additional thing that you could purchase for your pole or your shepherd's hook to put it on so the squirrel tries to climb up the pole, but it gets stuck there. It cannot go any further. So consider using a baffle. There are other baffles that are more cylinder shaped and longer to deter raccoons if that becomes a problem for you. I tend to only have problems with raccoons in like early summer when the raccoons are also trying to feed their own babies. And what I do is just take my feeders down for a couple days, or at least take them down at nighttime and put them in the garage so that the raccoons aren't getting into them during the busiest time. But just like all animals in that time of year, raccoons are trying to feed their babies, birds are trying to feed their babies. But the birds don't need the seed as much in the summer. They have lots of other options naturally. So don't feel bad taking your feeders down in the summer if you're having issues with raccoons or anything like that. And then another with the pole, sometimes people will say, well, just grease your pole, put some Vaseline on it, and then the squirrels can't climb up it. The problem with oiling or greasing poles, yes, it will help keep the squirrels off of it. But should the birds happen to brush up against it at all, they cannot get that oil or grease out of their feathers, and then they will not be able to fly. So that's a problem. And lastly, make sure that your feeders are not somewhere where outdoor cats are prevalent. If you are going to set up a bird feeding station, you do not want to have your outdoor cat anywhere near it. And in fact, cats that are outdoors are one of the biggest killers of birds. So keeping your cats indoors is not only safer for your cat, but it also helps the bird population as well. And finally, a word about cleaning and maintenance of your bird feeders. So you cannot just pop a bird feeder out and then not think about it anymore. You do want to keep it clean. So imagine that you went to a restaurant where the tables were never cleaned. It would be full of germs. You would not want to eat there. The same thing happens with bird feeders. If we don't clean them regularly, they can become a source of disease. Your food will go bad faster, and the birds can get sick from visiting sick feeders or dirty feeders. So the rule of thumb that we tell people is to try to clean your feeders every couple weeks. Sometimes life gets in the way and it may not happen every couple weeks, but maybe once a month if you can, and just try to really keep them clean. So this is also something to consider when you're deciding which feeders to buy. You might find a feeder that is cheap or cheaper than something else, but they might be harder to clean. So consider how easy it is to take them apart to clean all the inside spots, because you really do want to clean all of it. So to clean your feeder, you can soak it in really hot water and dish soap, or with a diluted bleach solution. 9-to-1, 10-to-1 seems to be the general rule of thumb. Buy scrub brushes that you're only using for your bird feeders. Don't use the same ones that you're using for anything else. And after you give them a good scrub, clean them, get all that old food gunk out of there, allow it to completely dry before you refill it. A caveat, if you have hummingbird feeders or oriole feeders in the summertime, you want to clean those a little bit more frequently. The sugar water goes bad fast. It can actually ferment in there and get really bad and nasty. So when it's above like 90 degrees, they actually say to change it out, clean it daily. So in the summertime, I do not fill my hummingbird feeders full. I fill them, maybe a third or so, and just try to refill it every day or two. And just give them a good rinse, a little scrub every day, just to keep it from getting really nasty. You think sugar, bacteria, it's going to grow more frequently and more quickly in the summer hot time. So that is all the information I have for you. I'll leave you with this photo. This is my personal backyard setup for bird feeders. I use shepherd's hooks. You can buy a whole pole system. You can buy shepherd's hooks. I have baffles on all of them, and you can see I have a platform feeder, a Niger feeder, a thistle feeder. I have a tube feeder. I have a hopper feeder. I have a suet feeder, and then I have a cylinder feeder. And on this beautiful snowy day where I took this photo, I have a wide variety of birds, including a ton of cardinals. I have chickadees. I have a downy woodpecker, a pileated woodpecker who's on the tree, but he definitely visits the suet feeder and cylinder feeder as well. Got a northern flicker, which is another type of woodpecker. I believe there's some juncos on the ground. Wide variety of birds, tufted titmice, nuthatches, you name it, we've got it. I've gotten a lot of different kinds of birds at my feeders. Just off screen here would have been a heated bird bath. So if you want to put on a bird bath, consider in the wintertime. It's going to freeze, but birds still need water, so you can consider adding a heater. You can really go all out with this. You can keep it simple and just put out one or two, right? But I have found that when you feed the birds, it's one of those things that it's really easy to get into, to have a lot of fun with. So if you're getting your bird feeding station set up and you have some questions or thoughts about where to put it, troubleshooting, you want an opinion, please reach out. Our email address is just there on the screen, naturecenter@zionsville-in.gov. Would love to help you set up your bird feeding station. Thanks so much for joining us today, and happy birding!